Tonight, at some point, you might cut yourself. A knife slips while you're chopping an onion. A piece of paper catches the side of your finger. You scrape your knuckle against a door frame, and you won't think about it at all. You'll run it under the tap. Maybe stick on a bandage. By the weekend, you won't even remember it happened. Now take that exact same cut. The same shallow, ordinary, forgettable cut, and move it back 30,000 years. That cut could be the first day of the last week of your life. You've heard the number before. Ancient humans died at 30. Sometimes it's 25. Sometimes it's 35. But the message is always the same. Life back then was short. Brutally, almost unimaginably short. And the picture it puts in your head is a specific one. A 30-year-old hunter, gray-haired, stiff in the joints, worn out, collapsing from old age while everyone around them nods like this is completely normal. That picture is almost entirely wrong. The number is real, but it does not mean what you think it means. And once you understand what's actually hiding inside it, the story stops being about people aging fast. It becomes something quieter and a lot more unsettling. To see why, you have to look at what that number is actually made of, and it's made of children. The first thing to understand is that there are two completely different things people call life expectancy, and they get mixed up constantly. There's life expectancy at birth, and there's life expectancy once you've already survived a few years. These are not the same number. They are not even close. Life expectancy at birth is just an average. You take everyone who was ever born, including the babies who died in their first hour, and you average all of their ages together. And here's the problem with that. A single death at age 1 drags the average down with enormous force. You'd need that baby to be balanced out by someone living to 70 just to land back at 35. So picture a small group. 10 children are born. 5 of them die before the age of 5. The other 5 live long, full lives all the way to 70. What's the average? You add it up, you divide by 10, and you get somewhere around 36. But look at who actually died at 36. Nobody. Not one person in that group. Half died as toddlers. Half grew old. The number 36 describes the life of literally no one who lived it. This is the part that trips everyone up. We treat an average like it's a typical person, but an average is just arithmetic. It doesn't care whether anyone in the group ever matched it. Mix enough deaths at age 2 with enough deaths at age 70, and the math spits out a number in the middle that belongs to no one. It's a ghost. And for 200 years, that ghost has been walking around dressed up as a fact about how our ancestors lived. That is almost exactly what's happening with the famous Stone Age figures. The low average isn't telling you that adults were dropping dead in their 30s. It's telling you that a heartbreaking number of children never got the chance to grow up at all, which raises the question nobody ever stops to ask. Not how long did ancient humans live, but what exactly was killing them? And the answer is something you've walked right past your whole life. And when you look at the better number, the one that asks how long you'd live after surviving childhood, the whole picture changes. The anthropologists Michael Gervin and Hillard Kaplan spent years pulling together death records from a dozen hunter-gatherer and forager societies around the world. And what they found back in 2007 surprised a lot of people. The single most common age for an adult to die, once they'd made it through those dangerous early years, wasn't 30 or 40. It was around 72, roughly the same as much of the world today. So if adults were regularly living into their 70s, that leaves us with a much darker question. What exactly was killing all those children and all those people who never reached old age? Because something was. Something was filling that gap year after year, generation after generation. And here's where the answer surprises almost everyone. When you imagine the dangers of the ancient world, you probably reach for the dramatic ones. The lion in the tall grass, the boar that gores, the rival tribe over the hill, the famine that empties the camp. And those were real. People did die that way, but they were never the main event. When Gervin and Kaplan sorted out the actual causes of death across those societies, the breakdown was striking. Violence and accidents together, every predator and every fall and every fight came to about 20%. Old age, the slow wearing down of the body, was only about 10%. And the rest, the overwhelming majority, around 70%, came from one thing: illness, infection, disease, not the lion. The thing is too small to see. The single most dangerous animal that ever hunted your ancestors had no claws and no teeth. It lived in a scratch. It had a bad tooth, and it killed more people than every large predator in history combined. Take the tooth. We barely think about a cavity now. You feel a twinge, you book a dentist, it's fixed. But run that forward without a dentist, without antibiotics, without anything. The decay reaches the soft center of the tooth. An abscess forms, a little pocket of infection pressing against the bone of your jaw. And then, sometimes, the bacteria find their way into the bloodstream, or worse, upward, toward the brain, and there was nothing to be done. You couldn't pull every tooth. You couldn't drain it cleanly. You just lived with the swelling and the throbbing and the slow heat building in your jaw, and you waited to find out which way it would go. Maybe it drained on its own, and you got lucky. Maybe it didn't. A single rotten tooth in the wrong week could be a death sentence handed down by your own mouth. This wasn't rare. In the great ledgers of death kept in London in the 1600s, teeth appears again and again as one of the leading causes of death in the entire city. Not a footnote. Top 5 or 6 year after year for 2 centuries, people were dying of their mouths in numbers that would make a modern dentist's jaw drop. And you can hold the evidence in your hands. Archaeologists working a 4,000-year-old cemetery in Iran found the jaw of a woman riddled with abscess cavities on both sides, the infection so far gone it had eaten into the bone itself. She may well have died from her own teeth, from something a 5-minute appointment would erase today. And it wasn't just teeth. It was the cut on the hand while butchering an animal, the scrape on the leg from a thorn, the splinter that didn't come all the way out. Any of them could go wrong. The wound gets warm, then red. Then it swells, and the redness starts to crawl up the arm in a thin line, and a fever sets in, and nobody around you knows what's happening or how to stop it. They can keep you warm. They can bring you water. They can stay with you. That was the whole of medicine. And the worst part was that you'd know. You'd watch that red line climbing toward your shoulder, and you'd understand, with total clarity, exactly where it was going. There was no mystery to it and no mercy in it. People learned to read those signs the way you read a weather front coming in. By the time the line reached a certain point, everyone in the camp already knew how the story ended. They just never said it out loud. And it kept finding new ways in. Childbirth was its own quiet emergency, repeated over and over across a woman's life. The danger wasn't only the birth itself, though that was dangerous enough. It was the days after. A new mother could come through the hardest part, hold her baby, start to breathe again, and then a fever would creep in from an infection she had no way to see and no way to fight. And a week later, she'd be gone. Not from the birth, from what came quietly after it. And because a woman might give birth 5, 6, 7 times in a life, she rolled that particular dice again and again, every single time. And underneath all of it, the children. The studies of these early populations, the careful ones by researchers like Anthony Volk and Jeremy Atkinson, suggest that something close to 1/3 of infants died in their first year, and that nearly half never reached adulthood. Most of them taken by the same thing: infection in small bodies with immune systems that hadn't yet learned the world, and no medicine to lend a hand. That's the real engine behind the number. Not bodies that aged at double speed. A world where the smallest things carried the sharpest edge, and there was nothing to dull it. For 300,000 years, there was no medicine that could reliably stop a wound from killing you. There was your body's own defenses, the care of the people around you, and luck. That was the entire list. But hold on, you might be thinking, what about old people? Weren't there elders? Didn't they matter? Yes, they were there, and they mattered enormously. In a world with no books and no writing, an old person wasn't just old. They were the only record the group had. They remembered the last drought, the rout that failed, the winter that nearly ended everyone. Lose one, and a library burned down. Some scientists think this is part of why we evolved to live so long in the first place, why grandparents stick around long after they stop having children of their own. But here's the thing, those elders weren't the rule, they were the winners. Every one of them had walked through decades of a world where any small wound, any bad tooth, any fever could have ended it, and simply hadn't been unlucky yet. They were proof that long life was possible. They were also proof of how many people never got there. What separated them from everyone who died young wasn't a stronger body. It was a roll of the dice repeated thousands of times that finally came up in their favor. And the thing that finally loaded those dice in our favor isn't ancient at all. In 1928, in a cluttered London lab, a scientist named Alexander Fleming came back from holiday to find mold growing on a dish he'd left out. Most people would have rinsed it and thrown it away. He looked closer. The mold was killing the bacteria around it, clearing a little ring of empty space in the dish. It took more than a decade for anyone to turn that accident into a usable drug. And one of the first people they tried it on, in 1941, was a police officer named Albert Alexander. The story goes that it began with a scratch from a rose bush in his garden. The wound became infected. The infection spread across his face, into his eyes, into his lungs. They gave him the new drug, and for a few days he rallied. He came back from the edge. And then the supply ran out, and he died. A grown man, killed by a scratch from a rose bush. 80 years ago. That is the world every single one of your ancestors lived in. Not most of them, all of them. For 300,000 years, to be human was to live with the knowledge that a cut could start a countdown, that a tooth could turn on you, that the smallest things were never really small. We didn't lift the ceiling of human life. People always could live into their 70s, and some always did. What we did was quieter than that. We reached down and pulled the floor up so that fewer and fewer people fell through it before they ever had the chance to grow old. You will probably cut yourself this week, and you will not give it a second thought. You'll be the first kind of human in 300,000 years who doesn't have to. And you won't even notice that the fear is gone.